Hey everyone, welcome back to Master Your Life Beyond the Founder podcast. I am your host, Luke Beastall, and do you know what? This episode today is very unique. I'm using the word unique because Kelly is actually from the same town as I was born, Sutton-in-Ashfield, and do you know what? Her story is something that I believe will not only inspire, but I genuinely feel that it's going to move a lot of people, and it's not what you'd probably think from when we actually delve into it. Now, she is a colon hydrotherapy founder. She's got her own academy. She's a functional medicine consultant, and she's also a university lecturer. So she's got a lot of strings to her bow, but she's also got a wealth of experience, 21 years to be specific. But I think what I'm really excited to delve into today is just where it all began, where it is now, what are those pieces that built to where she is today. So I know so many females that are listening to, and males in the entrepreneur space, are going to resonate. Or if you're someone that's wanting to go after a business, definitely listen, sit tight. This is going to be good. So look, Kelly, welcome to the show.
Hi, Luke.
I just think it's crazy how obviously we've connected obviously through social media, and we're both from the same area. Just if anyone's sort of in and around the Nottinghamshire, I'm sure they will know you anyway. But just tell our audience a little bit more about your background and what it is you do day to day.
Yeah, so obviously it's been a long journey. These things with business are quite long journeys, but I started out 20 years ago as a nutritional therapist and colon hydrotherapist at a time when, all of that sort of stuff was snake oil, really, and you were called a quack. Although now, of course, as we see, it's all over TikTok and all over Instagram, isn't it? All gut health and all of that sort of stuff. So not so much now, but certainly it was a very sort of alien world for me when I first started, or maybe not for me, but for everybody else. And I then developed the business from being a clinic into a training school, and then into a series of training schools around the world. Where I franchised the business model out, and then developed, and continued, I should probably say, the Colon Hydrotherapy Association, which is called RICTAT. I'm also a part-time lecturer in nutritional therapy, so I've remained to the core of what I trained in. I don't really consult one-to-one anymore because I just don't have much time to do that, as you can probably figure out. But I do just now and again if it's something quite specific that somebody needs help with. And alongside all of that, I've raised 3 children and 2 stepchildren, so they're all much older now, but it's been a journey.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that with us. I was literally just thinking when you said time, the sort of thing came straight to my mind. And obviously you're a mum of raising 5 children as well as, running a business. So, functional medicine, you said just there about it was sort of like quacky. It wasn't heard of as such, or it wasn't really in the UK.
Yeah.
How did that opportunity come about? Where did it sort of come to you that you're like, I'm going to go down this functional medicine route?
I already knew, which sounds really strange. I always knew I would do something medical. Okay, so that's as clear as I can be about that original intention. But if you spoke to my parents now, they would say, I wasn't only one for 8 years. So I had a lot of time on my hands, no siblings until, as I said, I was 8, which actually doesn't really count when you're 8, because then that baby that's born, which is now my wonderful sister, it's still another several years before you realise actually you do have a sibling. And what I mean by that, they're a baby, aren't they? So they can't talk, and then you're going out, and the paths really never connect for quite a while. Although of course they do now, we're both grown up. But before then I had a lot of time on my hands, as an only one. And I don't know why, because my parents weren't medical in any, respect of the word, but they had some medical encyclopedias. And for whatever reason, and I'm talking young here, I'm talking, 8, 9, 10, I'd be like reading them and just interested in them. And like you say, I'm from, Mansfield area, and my parents were like, what are you doing that for? Like, I don't understand it. But there was just an interest that I had, like an innate interest. But as I got a little bit older, for some reason, and I can't really answer this question, this is going to be difficult to answer, or it could be my own experiences in some respects, which I'll go into in a second. But I just thought that it doesn't really work. So the way that I judged it was, well, somebody gets ill and there is what we would call a pill for an ill. But it never really sat right with me. I always thought, but isn't that just treating the symptom that the person has and not actually looking at the reason that that's happened in the first place? So that almost detective part of the medical journey was missing. And that's something that I was really interested in. But having said that, I decided that my pathway was going to be something medical. I didn't know what it was going to be, and I changed my pathway several times, like we all do when we're young, you know. So I was going to be a journalist, then I'm going to be in the police force, then I'm going to be a lawyer. You know how it is. But the turning point actually was after university. So I did my first degree in journalism, and I wish more people were reminded of the actual job that you might have to do when you qualify in whatever modality it is that you choose to do. Because I thought being a journalist would be really quite interesting, because you know what, I get to speak to celebrities, and I'll probably be presenting this morning or something similar, and yeah, that's it. That's going to be my journey. So it was a full 360. I'm going to do that instead, and this is what I'm going to enjoy. However, and I was really good at writing. I was really academic. So again, it seemed like a really obvious thing to do. So it was a bit of a curveball at this point. And I did the uni, did well, started working in that area, just as a graduate trainee, for local newspaper. And I realised that it was none of what we'd actually spoken about. It was actually knocking on people's doors when things had gone wrong. And I struggled with that. I really struggled with that morally, that why wasn't I helping? That's the only way I can explain it. Why wasn't I trying to help them? Why was I just trying to write an information piece on probably the worst parts of some people's lives? And yeah, so morally I struggled, and it reminded me that we need to think more about actually the jobs we choose in terms of how that's going to affect us emotionally. So I decided what I'd do is I go traveling and backpacking. So I worked really hard. I sold my car and at 21 decided to go backpacking. And you'll give away my age entirely now, because unfortunately for me, I was in New York when the Twin Towers came down.
Oh, wow.
And it was something I can't ever explain to anybody really, but it was the first time I'd sensed fear in terms of my surroundings. So generally we feel quite safe where we are, but I was walking around New York feeling like, when's the next bomb going to happen? Or, feeling very, very vulnerable, and also feeling useless, that there was nothing I could do to help those poor people who were going through that at that point in time. And that was really the turning point. And so I got home and decided I would apply for medical school. And I got a place. However, this little niggle stayed in my side, that pill for an ill is just not me. So I started to research other things in the area and decided I'm going to do nutritional therapy and functional medicine. And I mean, you can imagine the alarm of my parents at that point, can't you? Like, seriously, like, make your mind up. You're doing this, now you're doing this. You've worked hard to get that place, and now you're doing this, And I never really doubted it for a day, and still 22 years on, I've never doubted it. And because that is what I truly believe is the way that we can help people get better. And that's not to say either that the medical profession aren't absolutely needed. We'd be absolutely lost without them in every single department. And that's not what this is about. It's about working alongside. And what I know is, the operations, the A&E, and, the medications and all those sort of things, as I said, they're absolutely vital to the NHS. And, long may it continue, and long may we have that service that I've used on several occasions, as I'm sure many of us have. But when it comes to chronic illnesses, then people are being left on some sort of conveyor belt often, not really knowing how to solve that problem. And that's where my expertise can help, and has helped on hundreds, if not thousands of occasions now. And to me, that is why I trained in functional med. It's why I trained in hydrotherapy. And as I say, it's tangible. I see the differences in people every single day.
Well, this is really good, Kelly. Thank you for giving our audience context as well, because how it was sort of pieced was really great. I just want to ask a quick question before we go into that a little bit more while it's on my mind. Where did you sort of create or install this belief in you, though, to sort of go deeper and beyond just the pill to sort of help people?
It's hard to say, really. I think maybe from being young, I always struggled with constipation from being born, really. And I had something called bronchocolitis when I was around 6 weeks old.
Right.
And that creates issues in the lung and the colon. It's an infection like bronchitis, but it can be quite chronic. And as far as we know, that was probably the start of it, but we don't know that for sure, of course. And so I always struggled to go to the toilet. And whilst ever that was something that I would never have spoken about at that time, because it was too private. As I got older, I realized that what I was trying to be helped with was not helping. So, of course, as parents do, back to the doctors, try this, try this, try this, try that. None of it worked. And again, this is probably, again, sums up who I am really, but I got to 16 and I was looking for work experience. And I was looking for work experience in health. Okay. And I saw hydrotherapy and in the yellow pages. So we're going back quite a few years, as you can see. I thought, what is that? That's something to do with the colon. And because I'd got this sort of medical knowledge from these books that I'd looked at previously, I knew what the colon was. And I knew that, hydrotherapy, two together, quite obvious, got to be water and the colon. So I did look into it, and I had to travel to West Bridgford. And I can remember, I've put my parents through all sorts, honestly. I can remember saying to my mum, I'm going to go and have this kind of hydrotherapy. I've booked for it, and she's like, no, you're not, And I said, well, I'll go on my own, so either come with me or don't, but I will be having it, and off I went, had 3 treatments over a month period, and I was fixed, just fixed. And I'm not saying it was the treatment itself, alone, but that person educated me in diet. She educated me in lifestyle. She educated me in actually just, taking a chill pill and jumping off the hamster wheel for 2 seconds, because I was so like, do this, never giving myself chance to actually relax. And all that together, I thought, hang on a minute, it's more than just the colon not working. This is actually the way that I give myself time. It's the way that I breathe. It's the way that I eat. And all of those things. So I think that's sort of where that functional systems approach of looking at health started to, I suppose, growth, that little seed started to grow further. And honestly, at that stage, as we go through all these little stages when we're young, at that stage, I thought, it was like £50 that person earned. And that was like from her house. So she must be earning £50 an hour and she doesn't have to leave home. And that is as simple as I looked at business as a 16-year-old. Thought that she might have some overheads or outgoings of any kind. No, it was just like £50 an hour. Yeah, I quite like to do that. And again, something just lodged. I didn't sort of action it then, but something lodged at that point where I thought, yeah, that sounds a good career to me. I'm fixing people. Why wouldn't I do that? And then the rest is history.
Yeah, I think that's so good, though, how you sort of shared that. So obviously, you don't know and can pinpoint exactly what got you to go deeper, but I think you've shared there your own experience, right? You probably had that itch thinking, hold on a minute, I've done a lot of research here. And then, like you say, you fell on that yellow page. I can remember yellow pages as well. Is that you sort of, yeah, and you just saw that opportunity and thought, okay, this could be something that could help me. And then somebody has given you a service and opened your eyes up, and you've trusted them, slowed down, and tried multiple things. Not, like I say, not just the treatment itself, and then realize, hold on a minute, and then you saw an opportunity, right? As in, you saw something that's probably not over in, well, it wasn't in the UK at the time, and you've sort of captivated that. And I think it was in you though from a young age. It's very, and I'm sure the audience listening will sort of pick up a little bit of just a bit of your story so far, that it was always in you to sort of find something a bit deeper and help people on a deeper level than just, like you say, you talk about the conveyor belt, the surface level stuff. Here's something, just take it, pill for the ill. You're sort of showing that, hold on a minute, there's got to be another way. And for you I know this is a bit of like a capturing it in one, but like functional medicine, and obviously you've been doing it 22 years. What's been the best thing that's given back to you in your life through?
Oh, without doubt, I can answer that so very easily. So a long time ago, before sort of regulations did change, which have happened sort of more recently. But my own father was diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Okay.
And he was 59 at the time. So no age really. And the scary thing about this is he had no symptoms whatsoever. So despite me being a functional med consultant, my dad, still thinks I'm a doctor now. So he was like, "Oh, Kel, just have a look at this mole on my back. I don't think it's all good, And I said, "Look, I'm not a doctor, but it looks okay to me, but go get checked." And he went and obviously got checked, and it was absolutely fine. But he was 59, about to turn 60. So they said, "Let's do an MOT while you're here." And they picked it up there in a blood test that his PSA score was like through the roof. So it was all like really sudden and out of the blue. And they also said, as I sort of knew at that time, that, you can have a raised PSA score if you've had like recent flu or a cold or something, because it's an immune sort of reaction. And so they were asking him all of these questions, and he was like, "No, not really. And, have you got any symptoms of, not being able to wee or anything like that?" And he's like, no, not really. So it came as an absolute shock. And what was the sort of the wider shock with that is the fact they said, actually, and there's nothing we can do about it. So we were it was at Christmas time as well, and we were sort of blown out of the water here. We were like, where has this come from? My dad was still working every day and nothing had changed. So we couldn't believe that this could be quite so bad when we'd not seen any sort of pattern to imagine that things are changing in this area. And although, of course, we know men don't always talk about these things, but, my dad still to this day, he's still here, says, no, honestly, there was no symptoms. There was just absolutely nothing. So obviously it's quite traumatic news, isn't it? So we were like, what shall we do? And he got offered to have injections, okay, which were hormone injections, which would have slowed down the growth, but they wouldn't have cured it, okay. And my dad, being my dad, said at the time, "No, I'm not having them," and starting all these hot flushes and that, "I've got enough on with your mum," and, just made a joke out of it. And he said, "Look, if it's my time, it's my time." And I was like, "Are you absolutely serious?" Because, my sister, as I said, she's 8 years younger than me, so she'd not got married. Not that people have to, but, she was keen to, and you'd not seen that yet, and all those sorts of things. So I was like, "You can't just give up on this." I said, how open are you to like trying a few things? And I said, "Look, I can't treat your cancer. That's not something I can do. But what I can do is I can give your body the best boost it can possibly have to be as good from an immune perspective as it can be." And so that's what we did. And it was absolutely transformational in his approach to what he had to deal with. So we can never make a claim as to what helped, what didn't help. We can't do that. We're not allowed to do that. And the decisions that my dad made in terms of what he was doing with his health. But to summarize it, just for maybe 6 months, something like that, he was like dairy free, no alcohol, no sugar. It was harsh. He was taking wheatgrass every day. He was taking supplements. He was doing all sorts of different things. Okay. And with the intent that he would just boost his immune system in the best way that he could. But what actually happened is when he went for a private scan, they told him that it had shrunk significantly. Okay. Which then changed the whole situation, because he was then able to have surgery to actually work on the cancer and remove the prostate if that's what he wished to do. So that's been the most transformational for me. It was also the most difficult, as you can imagine. Although having my father as someone I'm working with was actually really interesting, because he was really, really good with what he did. To the point where he was growing his own wheatgrass and all that sort of stuff. And he became significantly better than me at what I do, because he's a researcher, not by trade, but that's what he does. He likes to find out, So yeah, he and as I said, we're many, many, many years on now from that, and he's all fine and everything's been okay. And whilst it's not the only thing that he did, as I said, in the end, he had, robotic surgery, and he was, thank goodness, okay. And we thank, the surgeons for carrying that out. But to get to that point, nutrition and functional med definitely played a significant part.
Oh, how giving that back to you, and something that, part of your career you was able to, obviously I know it's like your closest family member, like your father and stuff like that. That's insane. What an amazing feeling from your part. But the fact that he was open-minded to it as well, because obviously he was sort of accepting defeat in a way. I sort of hear that a lot coming from guys. If it's my time, it's my time. Like, was you not scared? Was you not? Because when you hear the word cancer, it's like, oh, I'll leave it to the, the medical professional.
And I still say that now. I would not have even, talked about diet or anything with my dad if it hadn't have been for, the medical profession saying, look, there's nothing we can do. We can only give you the injections to slow this down. If there was any option at the beginning for anything else, trust me, I'd have handed it over with, gladness. But there wasn't. And so you're in a position then where, well, I know a bit about, health and how I can get the body working in an optimum way. And also what it's about, it's not about curing the cancer. That's not what it's about at all. And I'd never, ever make those claims. What it's about is optimizing the body so it has less of a load to work with on a daily basis. And that's what it's about, and boosting the immune system and all the things that go with that. And I know people, not who've dealt with me, but who've dealt with other therapists who specialize in this area. There's been people who've had chemotherapy, and then they haven't lost the hair because they've been doing certain things. And there's many, many stories you can read throughout the media now. It's not about curing. It's about just putting that body in the best position it can be in. And also sometimes it's the mental health, because actually feeling that you're doing something makes you feel better, rather than sort of waiting for an inevitable outcome that you might hear, you might be okay, you've got to wait for an appointment, all those sorts of things. I think it put my dad back in control in a lot of ways, that he could do all of this. And as I said, in the end, I was merely a signposter to say, go find this person, go and have a look at this, you might want to try this. And he did. And I was petrified. I mean, I used to go round to my parents' house, and I'd be looking at my dad from afar, analysing him, do you think his liver's overloaded? Do you, because you know too much and you can't unknow what you know. So then I'm like, oh, look at me, stick your tongue up, let me look at that, let me look at your fingernails. It was incredibly stressful at the time, but what can you do? You're in that situation where someone, wants some guidance, and you give the guidance as much as you can in that situation. And yeah, you're in a position where you sort of got to.
Yeah, obviously your back was kind of against the wall. But there's something that's coming through as a thread here, though, Kelly, from what you've sort of shared. And again, the audience probably might be feeling this. It's like, you've got this, there must be another way, or there must be an alternative. You're sort of finding gaps when probably that dark tunnel, there's no light there. You're still finding your way through. Has there ever been a moment in your career where that mentality or that way of doing things has been challenged? If so, what did you do to sort of come out the other side?
Yeah, I think, goodness me, if I gave them more, we'd be here all day. I've had so many challenges, so many disappointments, so many, stop gaps, I suppose, and then you're having to start again and bring yourself back up again. I think in terms of like nutritional therapy and functional med itself, no, like it's never let me down in anything that I've done. I'm confident to say that everybody that I've worked with has always seen some positive benefit to what they're working with. So it's an amazing modality to be in, and as I said, that works alongside things that people are doing medically or even other alternatives. So from that perspective, I don't ever feel like the modality has let me down, or anyone that I've worked with. But part of that is also being honest and knowing when something's within your scope and isn't. So, if I can't work with something, I will be very honest and say, look, I'm not the best person for you here, but I know who is, and I can send you to, whoever it happens to be. So from that perspective, no. I think the hardest lesson for me is more from a business perspective, that you think you've got it all worked out, and I can remember once somebody saying to me, I can't remember what it was, I was younger, and I was trying to justify something or another. It was nothing to do with nutrition, actually, but I can't even remember what it was to do with now. But it was something about why something should have worked. And I said, I've spent hours doing that. It was something along those lines. And I remember the person saying to me, just because you've been a busy fool doesn't mean that it should have worked. There's no almost like the world doesn't owe you anything. And at the time I was fuming because I was like, whatever project it was, I can't remember now, but I'd spent literally hours or days doing this. And I was like, what do you mean? But it was such a business lesson, because it's true. And however hard that is to accept, it's really, really true. If you're sort of going around in circles, feeling busy, inventing jobs to feel like you're justifiably doing something useful, and we're all, well, I'm not saying everybody, but I think most of us are, guilty of that at times, and procrastinating, thinking that, all right, well, I'm scrolling and I'm actually looking for business contacts, or you're not, you're just all wasting time. But yeah, I think for me that was a harsh lesson, that actually the world doesn't owe you anything, and it's not about just working hard and then you'll get your just rewards, And I think the other hardest business lesson for me was, and people might disagree with me here, but I can only give my sort of perception as to what's happened in my life. But if you are from a deprived area, sorry, you are at a disadvantage. And I'd love to say that's not the case. It doesn't make anything impossible, but it does make it harder. In certain areas, and I'm not saying that everybody's a baby who lives in London. I'm not saying that at all. But, it's just access to facilities, access to people, access to expertise. I muddled my way through for the first 5 years thinking like someone's going to pull the rug under my feet at any time. And what can I do? I don't know if that's right or what I should do in this business decision, or, because I had nobody worked in what I worked in. So I had nobody who I could go to and say, what would you do? And unfortunately the book then stops with you. So I think you can make it, you can still do really, really well, and you can sort of grow into your entrepreneurial spirit or grow into yourself in terms of your business. But I think you do have to work harder, even if that is just the fact that you want to get on a train and it doesn't go to where you want it to go to.
Yeah, there's some good points there. Just on that though, Kelly, what do you feel are the disadvantages then as an entrepreneur coming from, in your terms, like obviously more of a deprived area?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard other sort of entrepreneurs talk about it on different podcasts, and Sarah from Dragon's Den, she talked about having that sort of northern accent, sort of that Geordie accent, was, as she's been in several business meetings where she felt that was a disadvantage, and she really felt it to the point where it actually fired her up even more to say, no, that's not going to be a disadvantage. You're going to understand that actually I know what I'm doing. And I think I could definitely give those examples where I felt that my accent has been a disadvantage. I felt that I've needed to hide where I'm from on my CV,
Right.
because I give unconscious bias. It could just be me. It really could. But that is my perception. And I've seen enough examples to feel that it is a real thing, that there is this north-south divide. It's improving. Definitely it's improving. But certainly in the earlier days, very much so. And also the disadvantages of being in something that is niche, I suppose, unique and niche. It's hard to go out there and explain what you do every time you meet somebody. Yeah, because, what do you do? I do functional med. It's not like saying I'm a plumber or, I'm a decorator or, people sort of have an idea of what you do in that. But for me, I have to explain what I do, and which is great in some ways because it opens a wider conversation. But I always get the same question, well, why don't they just do it on the NHS then? Well, there's many reasons that they don't, but hopefully, let's say things change in the future. So yeah, I think I've felt several disadvantages, not only just because of where I'm from, but also because of the area I've decided to niche into.
Yeah, I think there'll be people getting this, and I can say that, obviously being in a similar sort of area to yourself, that, to sort of even find sort of the people that may be on a similar level as well, it's harder to come by. They're not as easily accessible. Maybe they're all over the place. Who knows? But I do agree with that. For you then, obviously you've created a success in what you do from the area. How did you sort of navigate that? What sort of action steps did you have to take to sort of, build this long-term sustainable business? Because obviously people can build something, but they can soon, drop off by the wayside.
Yeah, I think it's just bloody mindedness, really. If I'm honest, I think every entrepreneur will tell you that in the end, you've just got to really, really want it. And what became your motivational goal or your motivational sort of catalyst at the beginning will change all of the time. So you might want to have done that when you were 18 to impress somebody, or I don't know, to make an impression in a certain area. But your goals and motivations change as you change as a person, as you have a family, as you get older. So I think definitely the reason that I'm successful is because I refuse not to be. And that is as simple as it gets. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs will definitely agree with that. There's been, I could, sit here and say, oh, no, it's always been like easy and, linear. And no, it hasn't. I've wanted to give up so many times. I can't tell you, I felt lonely so many times because, as I said, when you're the one making the decisions, you have to be accountable for that decision. And sometimes they're big decisions as well. But if you've got good people around you as time moves on, then they give you a different thought process, a different thought pattern. And you also realize that actually you're probably overthinking some things. So I remember a great example. One of my friends is a business coach, and I was taking on a new project, and I said to her, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm starting this new thing, and like, they want me to do this consultancy program for them. Like, what should I charge? I've not done anything like this before. And I can remember just saying to me, well, what do you want to earn? And I was like, well, it's not that simple. And she's like, no, it is. And yet I was like working out like all of these different factors over, okay, well, what would other people charge for this? And, what? But no, she was like, well, what would you be happy with? What do you think is justifiable? Because there's only one of you, and, it's what you feel is appropriate in that area. And either they take it or they leave it. And that was another huge eye-opener for me, where it was like, oh, okay, so I've got a choice in this. And I think certainly I'd spent many years in business just having it done to me, if that makes sense. I'd not got a really clear plan. I sort of fell in lucky a couple of times. I got absolutely screwed over a couple of times. And that's just part of the journey. But things have changed significantly over the last sort of 10 years now. It's planned. Things are going in an order in terms of the way that they should. But it takes time to understand that. You've got to speak to people and give an element of trust to people, because it is difficult, particularly when you've had these bad experiences where you think, oh, I'm never going to trust anybody again. But actually, there's some people who will freely give their information and advice to try and assist you. One of the, I suppose, most compelling bits of advice that I received was from a friend of mine. Well, two, in fact. One's quite a funny story. So the first one was, she said to me, "You're not charging enough." And this is when I was doing like colonic and I was on the end of the pipe. "You're not charging enough." And I was like, for goodness sake, like, we're in a deprived area. There's a limit on what I can charge. And I want people to be able to afford this service who need it. And that was my whole initial goal, that people could afford this service who needed it and actually get better like I was able to. She's like, yeah, I get it. I get where you're coming from. So where could you charge what you should charge? And I said, oh, I don't know, Dubai. That's how my clinic in Dubai started. Just that flippant comment. And then she was like, right, you better start then trying to find someone in Dubai to work with. And that's how the Dubai training school came about, just from that. But the funniest one was when I had an employee who decided to go on her own. And it was not the smoothest sort of transition, because I had not been aware that she'd been sort of planning to do this, which is, the purpose of somebody when you are a leader or a manager is actually to make someone really good at what they do. And I think I did do that, so with that, there's, some credit to be taken. But at the time it was heartbreaking. I was like, oh, I really don't want this person to go, from an emotional perspective, but also from like, I'm going to have to employ somebody else and all those other things that go like logistically with that. But a friend of mine who's got ADHD, she's very straight to the point. And she said, "You're a colonic trainer, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And she says, "Well, did you train her to do colonic?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And she says, "Well, you've done your job then. What are you complaining about?" But just having that, put it into a completely different perspective. So I'm like literally losing my mind over, no, I'm going to employ somebody else. Oh, I've got all these clients to deal with. And she just really summed it up really simply. Like, look, you've done your job. That was your job, to shape somebody else to do the job you do. And I think if you're able to reflect on something like that in a more positive mindset, or with a more positive mindset, it actually grows you in terms of a person, but also in terms of your business, how would you say, viewpoint.
Yeah, I think it's just like what you've shared there, two great examples, just bouncing off something to somebody else and then relaying it back to you. Obviously you've got all these voices in your head, maybe, because obviously, like you said, you're the business owner, you carry a lot of weight, you've got a lot of responsibility, and you've just sort of voiced it out to somebody, even though, like you say, you've shared there as well that you've had moments in your business career where you've lost trust because of people doing you over in business. I think, I can vouch for that as well. I've had exactly the same. I think, people who's listening to this that are wanting to start a business, that will most likely happen, whether it's an individual or a corporation or a business, but it's how you sort of bounce back from that. But it can be that one simple conversation, like you said, like that simple, well, go set one in Dubai, make it happen, or go and speak to somebody. And there you go. You've now franchised a model, but you've also learned something as a person and changed in a positive way.
Yeah, entirely. And I think you've got to reframe that most people in business have that situation where someone you employ wants to go off on your own and replicate what you've done. And at the time, it's really hard, isn't it? Because you're like, well, that was my idea. And, but the truth is, it's not mine. It's not my colonic. I didn't invent colonic, and everybody has the right to go out and do that. The truth is, it's not easy, and a lot of people do go out there and do it and then realize actually it's not as easy as I thought it was going to be. But the truth is, everyone has that right. And I think we need to be less selfish in business, however wounding it is at the time. We do. And one of the most, it seemed the silver lining to the cloud, even if that takes a little while. And now when I reflect back, and so many people, entrepreneurs, say this, I reflect back on everything and now I see why that had to happen to make this happen. one of my most momentous was when I first started out, I was going to do obviously colonic alongside my functional med. I was like 24, so quite young. All of this is like a brand new business, setting out on my own. And the equipment for colonic was really expensive. Okay, so I think it was something like, in total, cost me around £8,000. And I didn't have that money, so I had to get a loan. So I got this loan, and I was paying something like £200 a month over a period of time, probably less than that actually. And I was going to just, work my way with this, and it'll be okay, because when I get my clients, then I'll be able to, pay my loan, and it'll be okay. Don't worry about it. And I was never really someone that was too anxious about taking the leap with anything. Almost maybe to a fault in some respects. I'd always say, yeah, I'll do it. And then afterwards think, okay, I need to figure out how I'm going to do it. And I think there's blessings and curses either way. I think, there's pros and cons to being over sort of prescriptive with what you do, and also being under prepared. But for me, I was always like, nah, it'll be okay. It'll be all right. We'll find a way. So I set out, and absolutely, I did find a way. The business started to build quickly. I realized people around me needed the service. Everything that I thought was true was true. I was good at what I did. I made a difference. All these sort of core reasonings for your business were sort of coming to fruition. Brilliant. Until the guy who I had a service contract with, I'll make it very short, took my machine and serviced it off-site one day because he didn't have the part. Well, at least that's what I thought. The truth was that he'd gone bankrupt and my machine became assets. So I've lost £8,000 worth of machine, which has now become his business assets. And yet I've still got a loan to pay with no way of earning any money to actually pay the loan back. So I was like, I'm over and out. Literally, I've only been going 2 years and I can't get another loan. So I can't do colonics without my machine. So I'm just in a bit of a mess. And I got this really random phone call, such a crazy, strange phone call. And the phone call was something to akin, I've been watching you. And I mean, it sounds like something out of a scary movie. And I was like, excuse me, who is it, please? And she said, oh, I've got a training school in London. I do colonic too. And I understand you've been done over by the second-hand car salesman. How she knew all of this, I don't know to this day. And I was like, I don't know what you mean. And she's like, oh, you've had your machine taken, haven't you? And I said, yeah. And it was all really surreal, because the internet was in its infancy, so it was not that people could easily find stuff about you like they can necessarily on Twitter, or X as it's called now. So in any case, all of this has been going on. And she said to me, right, okay, we make equipment for colonic. So I'll do you a deal. I'll give you a machine for free. And I was like, what's the catch? Because this sort of thing doesn't happen. And she said, well, people tend to buy the machines that they train on. And you're training people to do colonic. We're selling machines, so it's a win-win, really. And I said, well, I don't want to be financially linked in any way. Ultimately, it's for people to make their own decision on what equipment they want at the end of the course. And she's like, yeah, no problem. But actually, that was, 18 years ago. And recently, in the last year, her equipment business, I've taken over. So actually, full circle over 18 years, whereby that one phone call, that one bad deed that occurred to me, because of course he would have known that my machine would have been assets, then turned out to be actually the best decision that could have ever happened to me. But you can't always see it at the time. So be patient, I would say, if you're listening out there. If you had something really terrible happen to you in business, or a door's been closed on you and you can't see why, just give it a little bit of time, because often it all starts to become quite apparent as to why that had to close to open a new one.
Yeah, that's brilliant. What a story as well. I think that's a really key lesson and insight there for the audience, and wherever they are in the journey of life right now. I just think, that the hindsight's a beautiful thing, just being able to sort of reflect on, and you're absolutely right, entrepreneurs, guys that have been on this show through the episodes, all do pick out those moments which probably at the time felt like you're going to go bankrupt, or life's over. Yeah, like you said, you thought, I've only been in it 2 years, I'm now out the door. has turned out to be a blessing, and it's complete. And like I say, now you've taken over, you've obviously franchised your business. Just going into that part now, obviously you've got an academy, you're working, you franchised it all over the world. What made you in your, and as a business owner, what made you decide to sort of, because obviously, you've spoken there about being done over in business and struggling to trust people. What made you decide to do that sort of model?
Yeah, again, it's a friend of mine who's sort of a bit of a business mentor for me, like on a sort of consultancy basis now and again. It was her, really, I'd say. It was at the end of, obviously, the drama of I've got to employ somebody else now and all that sort of stuff. I've not got time to go on back on the end of the pipe and all that sort of stuff. She said something along the lines of, your days on the end of the pipe are done, I think. I think you need to sort of be appealing to a wider audience. I think a wider audience sort of deserve to hear what you've got to say and talk about. And it sort of started there. And she just said one sort of sentence that always stuck with me. And I do share this with people that I mentor and help now. And she said, why are you that keen on having the whole of the pie? Just like literally just have a slither of it. Just have a slither of lots of different ones. And it just stuck with me. And I thought, well, I've never really thought about that before. I just thought that I had to protect what I've created, and so I started thinking in a different way. And I needed to think about, I think if you speak to like a lot of chefs is a great example, like they want to own a chain of restaurants, but they still want to be in every one to make sure that the quality's as it was. So I needed to find a way that I could still have a hands-on approach, even though I wasn't doing the practical training anymore. So I developed a model where I'd be doing the theory online. So my numbers were sort of limitless, really. But I would always be involved in that initial part of the journey of the student, whoever it was, wherever they were in the world, as a mandatory part of the training, because I needed to make sure they were getting what they needed to get for accreditation purposes as well, not just for, ego purposes, if you like. Although there was an element of control freak there, I'll admit to that. But I just wanted to make sure everything remained at the standard that I'd expect it to be at. And that was it, really. It was just, I can do this. So I thought, right, okay, wouldn't it be nice now to go back to people that I've trained all over the world and see if they want to now grow to their next stage? So that's sort of what I did, and just went to a few people that I trained. And I think the first one was in Nigeria. And I just said to her, look, you know what, how do you fancy training for me now? You qualified 10 years ago, you know this inside out, and told her the model of how I would see it working. And she was like, oh my goodness, yeah, that's an amazing opportunity. I'd love to. And then, yeah, Nigeria became Dubai, and Dubai became Sweden, and Sweden became, etc. And that was it. The model was so easy to adopt because I knew the industry inside out. I think out of all the schools that I've got, there's only one that I didn't actually train myself from the beginning. So being part of their development into trainers and, the next stage of their entrepreneurial journey, again, is incredibly rewarding to see them grow. And then they're obviously creating the next generation of penile hydrotherapists. So yeah, it's a great business model, of course, but it is very, it gives me a lot of satisfaction to see people, flourish in what they do.
Yeah, I think it's great. Obviously, the impact's high. You've expanded more than you probably would have done, like you say, on your own, because that pie sort of analogy, I think, is great. A lot of business owners or people that, I guess, when they start out a business, which rightly so, you have to learn the hard way. I guess that you could be the bottleneck. You could be the person that say you wants to protect everything, especially because, you don't think people could do it as good as you or anything like that. But you have realized, again, just having that conversation with somebody else, you've referenced your friend and, that does mentorship, just having that chat and then them probably saying something or seeing something that you're not seeing has sparked a light in you to then go, actually, do you know what? I can make this happen. It's not as complicated as I'm making out it to be.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. You put, I certainly do. I don't know about other people, but I certainly put blocks in there before they even exist. So I was like, I've got this really good idea and we should do this, but oh no, but we can't because actually that might happen. But I never let it be a permanent block, even if it's things that I can't at that point fathom at that point as to how I'm going to sort of get over that barrier. I still sort of press forward and almost think, well, when I get to that point, then I'll give it a little bit more attention, and see how I can then, thereafter deal with that. And I think a lot of that was, with the sort of taking on the equipment as well, because that's a whole different journey. That's a manufacturing journey. It's not a, delivering a therapy journey. So there was a lot to learn there, and it would have been very easy to say, nah, it's like, I don't really have the experience in manufacturing. But actually it's about finding those people who can support you in your journey. And that's actually as important as your own business journey, because as I said earlier, you're nurturing people to develop their expertise and giving them an opportunity in something that they might have not thought about, which then opens the door for them. So yeah, I've never let anything stop me like that. But certainly there's been like sometimes these little barriers. I'm like, oh my goodness, how am I going to get over this one? But we sort of always managed to get there with, hard work. You're not going to deny, it is hard work. And, I give probably, I couldn't even put an estimate on it, but a good number of hours per week for free, in terms of what I do. But that's also part of innovation, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's some good bits there for people to sort of delve into and take away, especially, like I say, that conversation. Again, people need people, right? I mean, yes, and you spoke about it being lonely as well earlier on in the episode, being a business owner. I think that's a common thing that I hear a lot of, and just for people to be aware of, obviously if you've been employed and you've obviously used to being around a team, and maybe you've outgrown them, and you're thinking of, like you say, creating something in your own path for freedom, if that's what it is that you're wanting to do, that it can be lonely. For you then, just to sort of encapsulate the business owner world, obviously you've got skin in the game, right? Let's be honest, 22 years. What do you feel as a business owner people need to have as a trait or a value for them to build a successful business?
You'll hear this all the time. Resilience is key. You are going to get knocked, and you've got to. I hate the word resilience in some ways, so I'm annoyed that I've used it, because I think the other connotation of resilience is like you keep taking knocks and it's okay because it's something that we should just be. So I don't mean it in that context. I think, resilience is actually just trying to find, like I said, a solution through these barriers that, are hopping up, and then you're like, okay, how can I keep going and trying to find a way through? It doesn't mean, trying to sort of, I don't know, maintain yourself in very difficult circumstances. That's not resilience, is a difference. But I think that ability to stick to your why, so as I said, that why is going to change on, when you do it for yourself, you do it for the ego, you do it for the status, you do it for, I'm not saying this is me, by the way, I'm just giving lots of different reasons, but you do it for your family, you do it to get out of work, you do it to have a better work-life balance. There's so many reasons that people do business. But whatever your why is at that point, try and remember that. I'd say the most important by far, I'm going to say two different angles. So for me, it's your core values. So you will have core values, and your core values will be the ones that you think about like instantly. The ones that come to your mind, the ones that come from the enteric nervous system. So the gut feeling of, yeah, this is who I am and this is what I want. And for me, that was always integrity. It was being authentic to who I am and ensuring that the first point of this business is actually to help others. And I can absolutely say that from day one to now and for forever in the future, I've remained to stick to that. Unfortunately, that means that I've had to miss opportunities because I've had to stick to my guns on things because I'm very moral to what I do. But for me, if I worked against my core values, then I wasn't being authentic, which means I wasn't actually giving the best version of myself. And from my perspective, if you're living outside your core values, you'll burn out because you're not doing something that sits right with you. That's not to say, by the way, that core values have to be authenticity and morality. Core values for other people might be actually becoming a millionaire. It might be, I want to be the best at what I do in the area and own, 10,000 shops. I don't know. That's okay too. No one has to apologize for wanting to make money or wanting to be successful, because everybody's core values are different. But whatever they are, try and stick to them, because if you work against them, you won't be able to, survive in the business, because it will just burn you out because you're working against who you are. And then finally, this is not a trait, that this is something that I wish I'd done on day one. This is going to sound ridiculous when I said day one, because bear in mind I was 22 when I started out. So it's like, well, why would you ever think of this? But you'll have heard that age-old saying that, if you how do they say it? Something along the lines of, if your business can run without you, you've got a business. If it can't run without you, you've got a job. It's something along those lines. And I wish that I'd have thought about that from day one, because to get myself off the end of that pipe was very, very difficult. And I had not thought about it early enough in my business. So my top tip would be, even if you're 20 and you're starting out, you should already know what your exit plan is. Yeah. How can that business run without you when you want to retire or you want to do something different? So it's either you've got people working for you, or you've got units that are going to run themselves in some way, depending on what your business is, or you're selling something on a website or similar. But it doesn't really matter what it is. But your business cannot just be you, because at some point that's not going to be enough. And you're going to have to bring in others and share, your ideas as well. So yeah, that'd be my top tip.
Brilliant. And that's something as well that I can hold my hands up and say I never thought about when starting a business, but I totally hear that. And I just know the guys, I know you said resilience, but I think you expanded better than just using the word resilience, because obviously it's a thrown around term, especially in the world of not giving up, never give up sort of thing. But no, that's brilliant, Kelly. I really appreciate you sharing those 2 points, because I think it's good for people to sort of soak that up now before they get started, or maybe if they're the idea phase, they can look out for those signals. But this is actually a really good question to go on to, because we are getting towards the end of the episode. And I think just because you've spoken about the core values as well, I think this question will be really great to answer off the back of this. It's one that I ask every guest. What does mastering your life mean to you?
Yeah, it's totally different now. So, you're very unlikely to see me walking around in Louboutins. I don't think that was ever part of my plan. In fact, a funny story is actually when I bought an organic chicken, and it was around like 20 quid. And I can remember my partner saying, like, that's going back on the shelf. And my response to him was, am I wearing Louboutins? And he was like, fair point. But mastering my life means be able to live well, to be able to buy the food that I want to do, to look after my family, to be able to take that time out when I need to. And you're more likely to see, goats and chickens running around the garden than you are likely to see a Mercedes on the drive, because that is who I am, and that is my authentic self. I'm not there yet by any stretch. I'll let you know when I am. You'll see the chickens. But seriously, for me, mastering life is, to have that time to breathe. And you spend a long term building businesses and not having that, and working 80 hours per week thinking, I'm sure I've gone backwards this week. And yet you've given all that time. So there's lots of moments of, overworking, and you sacrifice. Anyone in business sacrifice. You sacrifice a lot of social life, a lot of, events that you would have, could have, should have, gone to in some respects. But I would say that is for me, that would now, at the age that I am now, that would be the definition of mastering it. So all the obvious stuff about, having a good business, and it, pays the bills and keeps developing itself and others, and making people well, of course, that goes without saying. But from a personal perspective, it's having that work-life balance, that time just to sit back and look back into it and saying, right, okay, where do we go from here that's going to, further improve, the offering, if you like. And that's not just for me, but for the wider, whether it be nutritional therapy industry, whether it be colonic industry. And yeah, it takes time to get to that where you've got that time. But for me, that will be the mastering of it when that work-life balance is reinstated.
Oh no, I love that, and I like the live well part. What stood out to me just from there is the live well and the breathing element. I think that sort of calmness, that sort of you're not feeling like you're not breathing and you're sort of constantly catching yourself or catching up with stuff. That point of I can take time off when I want to. I think a lot of people are probably in the place now, maybe listening to this for that hope and just for that sort of opportunity where they could probably look at it and go, I feel like that's where I'm at now, but they maybe want to create a similar life, whatever their values are. Well, look, Kelly, if anyone here today is sort of really wanting to follow your work, see obviously what you're getting up to and follow your business, or even just maybe reach out to you and start a conversation, where is the best place for them to connect?
Yeah, so if people want to contact, directly, I don't mind, emails if it is for, business purposes. So you can, it's contact, so just the word contact at hydrotherapyacademy.com. So you can go through there if it's anything specific to obviously the businesses and what I do. Of course, all the usuals. I'm not huge on socials because I've been too long in creating businesses. Like most of us, something has to give. But I am on Instagram as KL Hopley Nutrition, so you can find me on there if you want to follow and find out what I'm doing in the business as well. And of course, if anyone's interested in sort of the colonic side, then you can follow RICTAT, which is RICTAT, on Instagram as well.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you for that, giving our audience the options. We'll make sure that those links and information is in the show notes so that people don't have to sort of, what was that? They could just click it after and be directed to that. But look, final thing from me as the host today, Kelly, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I've really enjoyed this conversation, and you've given us so much. I think a lot of the guys are going to enjoy this one.
Oh, thank you so much. See you soon.